Hi, this is Everett's Watercolors. Welcome to my classroom. Now today I'm going to do a small painting on watercolor canvas. I did a sketch last week to give me a little value study, and then I used my colored pencils to do a color study. Well, I've transferred that design over to a watercolor canvas panel, and today I'm going to paint it with watercolor. I think you'll find that very interesting. So let's go to my painting table and let's get started. And let's go over some of my reference material here. That's a photograph I got off a travel brochure, and gave me a nice mountain range with a lake and a nice foreground. So that was the inspiration for the sketch. And the sketch I had sketched in the same format, and created a value study to show me the lights and darks and the design of my painting. Now, I did a sketch with the Holbein Artists Colored Pencils. I sketched out the area and did a color study to show what colors I'd be using on this particular painting. And there's a video link in the description below, and you can see how I did that. Now, Frederick's archival watercolor canvas board is what I'm going to paint on today. And this canvas board is very good and very interesting, but it's a new product which I want to demonstrate today. And it's water media that can be used on it, watercolor and acrylics. And then I transferred my drawing to the canvas board, 8 by 10 size, and that's what I'm going to paint on today. Now the material I'm using my regular palette with my Holbein Artists watercolors. Then I have an assortment of brushes, which will be a number 6 round Holbein watercolor brush, a number 16 round, a 3/4 inch flat, and a number 4 rigger. And selecting my colors, I'm going to start out with the light colors first. It'll be a light blue, cerulean blue. So I'll start with light colors, and then I'll add darker colors on top of that. And in using the canvas, I got to also mix up a lot more pigment, because the canvas does not absorb the paint. The paint stays on top, and therefore you have to add a little more pigment to make it move. I'll start out in the sky at the very top here with the cerulean blue. And I'm going to use regular brush strokes with the 3/4 inch flat brush. And the thing about canvas is the pigment is different from operating on watercolor paper. The pigment on watercolor canvas lies on top of the surface, so it is not absorbed. So the value that you get on the canvas stays about the same. It doesn't change. On watercolor paper, it gets lighter. But on the watercolor canvas, the value stays about the same as when you start. That's one thing you have to get used to with a canvas. Now, also on a watercolor canvas, the watercolor itself, again, is not absorbed into the canvas. It stays on top and dries on top of the canvas surface. So you have to put more pigment down and add in another. Here I'm adding a little darker value with cobalt blue. I want a darker value at the top. Now the brush strokes going across, you'll see some marks on there, but what happens with the paint on the canvas, as it dries, the paint will spread out, and it blends very nicely on the canvas naturally. And I always have to remember I have to put more pigment down than I normally would handle in a watercolor painting on paper. And those brush strokes will even out as it dries. Now here I'm lightening up the mixture a little bit, put a little water into that little mixture, and now I'm painting the lake or the river there. And I'm going to start with a little darker value in the little forward portion. And then as I move back, I'm going to add a lighter color. I'll be a little darker here in the little forward section of the water, and then as I move back into the landscape, I'll go with a lighter color. So I'll put a little water in the brush, lighten the color up, and then I'll move back into the landscape, going from a dark to a light, to give me an impression of depth in the water. Now I'm mixing up a middle ground colors, yellow ochre and burnt sienna. They'll give me some ground color. Then also add in some greens. I'm using green number 1, green number 2, which is the middle value, and hooker's green, which is a darker green. And this little mixture will give me the middle ground area, which is an overlooking hill to the outlook. It's like an outlook hill looking over the landscape. And that's what I gave the title to this painting. So I'm using the 3/4 inch flat brush to lay down the colors. And I'm picking up some greens. A little mixture here of greens and brown, a little bit of yellow ochre. So this is a hill with some grass and some bushes and small trees. So I'm just blocking in the area here with a light color. It'll be getting a little bit darker before I'm finished. This Holbein paintbrushes are very nice. They hold the paint very nice. It strokes smoothly on the canvas, and easy to control the paint and the pigment. Very nice brushes to work with. Holbein watercolor synthetic brushes. Now in the foreground, I'm going to mix a darker color. Now here I'm going to use a little bit of ultramarine mixed in with hooker's green to give me a nice dark mix. And the foreground is going to be dark, again, to lead into the painting. And this is also my design plan is to have a dark foreground. So again, I'm just covering the canvas with a dark mixture of the blue and green. And I'm staying with my color study, my value study, my value plan. The plan is to have a dark foreground, and that's the real value of having a color study and a value plan. This tells you a little roadmap of where you're going to go, where are your darks and where are your lights. And here I'm mixing more color on the canvas to get the pigment to spread out on the canvas fiber. Here I'm working a couple layers on top to make it smooth out. And watercolor canvas is a little different than working on paper, so you've got to get used to the texture of the canvas and also how much paint to put on the canvas and when you do your brush strokes. Now the mountain colors are going to be the darkest ones in the whole landscape. So I'm mixing up some Quinacridone violet along with ultramarine blue. Those are two of my darkest colors on my palette. And here I'm using the 3/4 inch brush, using the sides of the brush, the corners of the brush. I can get a lot of work done with a flat brush. It's easy. Brushes are easy to use. They come to a nice sharp edge, and I can handle them almost like a round brush, with the side of the brush, the corner of the brush. Holbein watercolor brushes. The 3/4 inch, I'm using the corner of the brush now to go across that little sliver of land off the edge of the mountain. And I'm following my value plan, getting the dark values in there into the mountains. These will be my darkest area. using the edge of the brush, the corner of the brush, to get the shape and the edges. Very easy to control the corners with the brush on the corner of the brush to give me a nice sharp edge. The paint spreads very easily on the canvas. Add a little more pigment to make sure you cover all. This area will be my focal point. It's where the light and the dark meet together there, so that'll be my focal point. Now here I'm going to use the round brush with a little bit of water mixing, a little lighter value of that same mix. I'm going to put, with the number 6 round, I'm going to put the added detail of the background way off in the distance. Another low mountain area behind that little edge of the river, way in the background. Here I'm using a round brush to add a little more definition, a little more detail to that mountain area next to the water. Here I've blocked in the basic shapes. Got my background, middle ground, and foreground all defined. Now a little detail on the middle ground. I'm going to add some bushes here. So I'm mixing up a mixture of greens with the burnt sienna to give me a little olive type color of greens. Always make a mixture of green with some other color. Don't want to use the pure green out of the tube. I'm using a number 16 round brush, a Holbein number 16 round brush, which comes to a fine point, and it becomes very useful. Very versatile brush. Covers a lot of area, holds a lot of paint, but also with a fine point, I can get a lot of detail. And here I'm putting in the bush and little trees that are in the middle ground, and I'm following my design plan, my value plan along my design. I got some shapes there I want to put in here in the middle ground. So I'm following my plan. It's the roadmap to my painting, my value study. It shows where I'm going to put my darks and where I'm going to put my lights, and the middle values. Right now the middle value here in the middle ground, along with these dark areas, defines those subjects or objects in the middle ground. Here I'm just shaping in the bushes, the little subjects here in the middle ground, giving a variety of shapes, a variety of sizes. But from the middle ground, from the foreground through the middle ground, these are the areas that'll guide your eye back to the focal point. So these lines of bushes and trees are really guidelines to move you back to the impact area. They're a very important area of the landscape painting. You want to be able to move the eye back into the back distance where you want the viewer to go. And shaping those little sizes, getting a little watching the edges, checking the edges out, checking the sizes and shapes. Adding a little more detail next to the edge of the hill, overlooking the river. Just a little fine tuning with the number 16 round. Give them a little more definition of those shapes. Now with a little bit of burnt sienna along with that green, I'm going to add in some more burnt sienna in with that green bushes to give me a little shadow. So the brown mixed in with the green gives me a darker color, and those give me a little texture, a little definition, a little shadow pattern on those bushes and landscape features. Now with the purple mix, I'm adding in ultramarine blue with that purple mix. I'm going to work on those background mountains. I'm going to make them a lot darker and also work on the edges, eliminate make darker edges and eliminate that white part of the canvas still showing. So I'm cleaning up the edges of those background mountains. Using a number 16 round brush loaded with dark pigment. We're adding a little more detail, a little more interest to the background, but mainly to control those edges and make them nice and dark. This is where the impact area is, so I want this to be my darkest area, right here next to that light, almost white paper in the water. So this is my impact area right here, really coming alive with that dark against the light. That will catch the viewer's eye and direct them to my impact area. So continuing on with the mountain side on the right, again cleaning up the edges, eliminating some of the white canvas showing on the edge. Now moving over to the left, now I'm going to clean up the area between the middle ground and the background. Again, all this is integrating that darks against those lighter middle values of the middle ground, eliminating some of the white canvas showing. I want there to be an edge that defines that particular, the difference between the middle ground and the background. Now I'm mixing up a dark green. I want to go back into the foreground and add some more value, adding a little darker mix here. This is a very thick pigment now I have in the foreground. I want a dark area in the foreground leading into the landscape. Here I'm also working on the edges. Here it's just simulating that we have tall grass here. So the brush strokes are going to be up and down vertical. Then working on the edge here between the foreground and the middle ground, just showing a little bit of edge, little texture edge, showing possible tops of those tall weeds that are popping up in the foreground. Just to define a little bit about what's happening in the foreground. It's very important to define edges between different parts of the landscape. Now here I'm going to use the number 4 rigger brush with a very fine point and a long tapering bristles. And I'm going to mix up a lighter color and a warmer color because I want to warm up that middle ground with some Quinacridone Gold, which is a nice bright yellow. It's between yellow ochre and lemon yellow, but it's going to warm up those colors in the middle ground. I have all those cool colors in the background, so I want warm colors in the foreground to separate the foreground and the background. And also I want to add a little bit of texture. You can see the brush handling here by moving the brush up and down. That flexible brush has lots of movement to it, so it's very easy to make texture. Makes very variable strokes. It'll look like weeds, it'll look like rough grass. So it helps define the landscape in a very simple way with this rigger brush. And also I'm eliminating some of the white paper there it's showing, cleaning up the edges. So this adds a little more color to the middle ground, and also adds a lot of texture, a lot of movement here with the brushwork. You can see here I'm moving the brush up and down. I can push the brush left and right. Get all kinds of movement with that. Now I'm going back into those bushes and I'm integrating the bush with the groundwork, because I don't want the bushes to look like they're stuck on top. I want to let them integrate into the ground. So I'm going along with that color, and I'm integrating the green of the bush with the yellow part or the brown part of the ground. So integrating those pieces will make the elements look like they're part of the landscape and not stuck on the landscape. And also working on the foreground edges with the same mix. I don't want too much detail here because I don't want it to distract from the impact area, but I do want the edges to be clear and clean, but not take your eyes off the impact area. Now I'm going to add a little bit of interest in the foreground. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mix another color to make some flowers, and I think this will give me just a little interest in the foreground. It's pretty boring up here, but I'll just put a few little things up here to give a little interest into the foreground. So I'm mixing yellow deep, yellow lemon, and maybe a little bit of orange to give me a nice bright color. And I'm using the rigger brush, number 4 rigger brush. And here I'm just going to put in some dots that simulate flowers. And put some in the middle ground, a little bit next to, almost to the foreground, but just little specks of yellow. And this is almost pure pigment. I mean, it's very thick pigment here. This lays on top of the canvas. But right now I'm building a little line here for the eye to follow that'll take you back into the impact area. So there's really a reason for putting some color here in the foreground to have the eyes move back into. And that completes the painting for today. I'll bring a little close up here to see the results. And that's my watercolor canvas, and I call it Northwest River Outlook. I think it turned out very good. And all the supplies today are the artist watercolor paints, the watercolor brushes, the watercolor canvas boards, and the colored pencils, all by Holbein, are available at everestwatercolors.com. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and select the bell to be notified of my next video. See you in the next video.